The night before my 20th birthday, my late wife Margaret appeared in my dream and grabbed my wrist with ice-cold fingers. "Harold, don't drink the wine your daughter-in-law is bringing tomorrow. Promise me you won't touch that bottle." I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. Margaret had been gone for 3 years now, but her voice was clearer than any living person I'd spoken to recently. And here's the thing about my wife. In 45 years of marriage, she was never wrong about people. Not once. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I'm curious. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city and the time in the comments below. I'd love to know how many of you have learned to trust those mysterious feelings when something just isn't right. Bon muy bye in the morning. That's what the clock on my nightstand read when I finally stopped shaking. The Seattle rain tapped against my bedroom window like nervous fingers, and I lay there in the darkness of my Bellevue home, replaying every detail of Margaret's visit. She'd been wearing her favorite lavender cardigan, the one she always wore when she had something important to tell me. Her silver hair was pinned back the way she used to style it for Sunday dinners, and those blue eyes that I'd fallen in love with at a college, dance and mutngin chin chumbai mulam, were filled with an urgency I'd never seen before. Not even when she'd warned me about our first accountant, who turned out to be embezzling funds. Not even when she'd insisted I get that mole checked, the one that turned out to be early-stage melanoma. The wine. Harold. Rebecca has been planning this for months. Don't trust her. Don't trust either of them. 3 times she'd repeated it before fading into whatever realm holds our loved ones after they leave us. I pushed myself out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the gray waters of Lake Washington in the distance. My son Daniel and his wife Rebecca had called 2 weeks ago, absolutely insisting on hosting my 20th birthday dinner at their Mercer Island home. Rebecca had been particularly enthusiastic, which struck me as odd at the time. In the 8 years she'd been married to my son, she'd never shown much interest in family gatherings. "Dad, Rebecca found this incredible vintage wine from the year you were born," Daniel had said on the phone, his voice carrying that salesman quality he'd developed working in real estate. "Mortngin chin chum nam muy bon Bordeaux. She's been saving it as a surprise. You absolutely have to try it. It's probably worth more than my car." Rebecca had grabbed the phone then. "Father, I've been planning this celebration for months. The wine is the centerpiece of the whole evening. You'll feel so special when you taste it. Father." She always called me Father. Never Dad, never Harold. There was something clinical about it, like she was following a script rather than speaking to family. Now, standing in the pre-dawn darkness with Margaret's warning echoing in my mind, that phone conversation felt different. Why was a bottle of wine so important? Why had Rebecca mentioned it 3 separate times during a 5-minute call? And why had Daniel sounded almost nervous when his wife was speaking? I made my way to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under my feet the way they had for the 30 years I'd lived in this house. The walls were covered with photographs, Daniel's Little League games, his graduation from the University of Washington, his wedding to Rebecca, where Margaret had whispered to me, "There's something cold behind that girl's smile, Harold. Watch her carefully." I dismissed it as mother-in-law anxiety. Margaret was protective of Daniel, our only child after 2 miscarriages. She wanted him to marry someone warm, someone who would give her grandchildren and fill holidays with laughter. Rebecca was polished, ambitious, and always seemed to be calculating something behind her perfectly made-up eyes. But she made Daniel happy. At least, that's what I told myself. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Margaret and I had shared thousands of meals, made thousands of decisions, built a life together. After I'd retired from my commercial fishing business 5 years ago, we'd talked about traveling. Europe, Alaska, maybe even Australia. Then the cancer came. Pancreatic. By the time they found it, she had 3 months. She spent most of that time making me promise to stay connected to Daniel, to keep the family together, to not let grief turn me into a hermit. But also, she'd said near the end, her voice barely a whisper, Trust your instincts, and trust mine, even when I'm gone. If I ever find a way to warn you about something, Harold, you listen. At the time, I'd thought it was the morphine talking. Now, I wasn't so sure. The morning of my birthday arrived gray and drizzly, typical Seattle autumn weather. Daniel called at 9 to confirm dinner at 6. Dad, you sound tired. Everything okay? Didn't sleep well. Strange dreams. Well, get some rest before tonight. Rebecca's been cooking all day. And don't forget, we have that special wine waiting for you. It's going to be incredible. There it was again. The wine. Always the wine. I spent the afternoon doing something I'd never done before. I went through Margaret's old journals. She'd kept them for decades, filling leather-bound books with her thoughts, observations, and what she called her feelings about people and situations. I found the volume from 8 years ago, the year Daniel announced his engagement. September muy lumpth, hangin le muy bai. Met Rebecca Chen, officially, at dinner tonight. She's beautiful, educated, works in pharmaceutical sales, says all the right things, but when she didn't know I was watching, I saw her looking at our house, our boat, Harold's business, with an expression I can only describe as hungry, not love hungry, asset hungry. I don't trust her. I don't trust her at all. But Daniel is smitten, and what can a mother do? I kept reading. March 10th. Hangin Lermertham. The wedding was lovely, but I caught Rebecca asking Daniel's college friend about the details of Harold's retirement plan, who asks that at their own wedding reception. She changed the subject the moment she saw me approaching. November Haimuhain Hangin Lamwichin. Thanksgiving at Daniel and Rebecca's new house on Mercer Island. That house cost high. Ba million. And I know Daniel doesn't make that kind of money in real estate. When I asked how they afforded it, Rebecca smiled and said, investments. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Something is very wrong. The entries continued, documenting small observations that individually meant nothing but together painted a disturbing picture. Rebecca's interest in my health, her questions about my will, her disappointment when I mentioned donating a portion of my estate to the Seattle Children's Hospital. The final entry about Rebecca was dated just 2 weeks before Margaret's diagnosis. February barred. Hai ngin le hai mui hai. I overheard something today that I can't get out of my mind. Rebecca was on the phone in their kitchen while I was in the bathroom. She didn't know I could hear through the vent. She said, "The old man is healthy as a horse. We might have to wait another 20 years at this rate, unless we help things along." Then she laughed. I came out before I could hear more, and she immediately changed the subject. Harold thinks I'm paranoid. But I know what I heard. I need to tell him everything I've noticed. Tonight. That night, Margaret had complained of stomach pain. The next morning, she'd been diagnosed with cancer. By the time she remembered to tell me about the overheard phone call, she was too sick to remember the details. Or so I'd thought. My hands were trembling as I closed the journal. Was it possible? Was my own daughter-in-law capable of what I was thinking? I needed proof. Margaret's dream warning wasn't enough. Her journal entries weren't enough. If I was going to accuse my son's wife of attempted murder, I needed something concrete. The dinner party was in 4 hours. I had a plan. I arrived at Daniel and Rebecca's Mercer Island home at exactly 6 o'clock. The house was stunning, all glass and modern angles overlooking the lake. Rebecca greeted me at the door wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Father, happy birthday. Come in, come in. Everything is ready for your special evening." Daniel appeared behind her, looking thinner than I remembered. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his smile didn't reach anywhere near them. "Hey, Dad, happy Baymuith." We hugged, and I felt his hands trembling slightly against my back. Something was wrong with my son. Something beyond normal stress. The dining room was decorated with silver balloons and a banner reading, "Happy Baymuith Harold." The table was set with their finest china, and at the center, like a trophy on display, sat a dusty bottle of red wine. "There it is," Rebecca announced proudly. "Mot ngin chin chum nam muy bon, Chateau Margaux." Do you know how long it took me to find this? Months of searching. It cost a small fortune, but you're worth it, Father. She was watching my face carefully, gauging my reaction. That's incredibly thoughtful, Rebecca. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just promise you'll drink the whole glass. Wine this old, it would be a crime to waste even a drop. Of course. Dinner was elaborate. Filet mignon, roasted vegetables, a complicated salad with ingredients I couldn't identify. Rebecca did most of the talking, filling the silence with chatter about their vacation plans, her work, the remodeling they were planning for the guest house. Daniel barely spoke. He pushed food around his plate, and twice I caught him staring at the wine bottle with an expression I could only describe as dread. "Daniel, are you feeling all right?" I asked. "Fine, Dad. Just tired. Work's been crazy." Rebecca reached over and squeezed his hand. "My poor husband works so hard. That's why I want tonight to be perfect. Speaking of which, I think it's time for the main event." She stood and retrieved the wine bottle, handling it like it contained liquid gold. With practiced movements, she uncorked it, poured a generous amount into a crystal glass, and set it in front of me with ceremonial precision. "To Harold," she said, raising her own glass of water, 70 years young. "May this next decade be your best yet." Daniel raised his glass too, but his hand was shaking so badly that wine sloshed over the rim. I lifted the glass to my lips, and then I pretended to drink. I'd learned the trick from my Navy days, a way to make it look like you were drinking during toasts without actually swallowing anything. The wine touched my lips, nothing more. I set the glass down with a satisfied sigh. "Incredible! You're right, Rebecca. Worth every penny." Her smile was radiant. "Have more, Father. Please, don't let it go to waste." "In a moment. First, I need to use the restroom." I excused myself, but instead of going to the bathroom, I slipped into the kitchen. My heart was pounding as I pulled out the small vial I'd hidden in my jacket pocket. Earlier that day, I'd visited an old friend from my fishing days, a retired marine biologist named Oscar, who still had access to basic laboratory equipment. If someone wanted to poison wine, I'd asked him, what would they use? Oscar had given me a testing kit used for detecting common toxins. "This won't catch everything," he'd warned, "but it'll detect the most common substances: arsenic, cyanide, thallium, the classics." Now, alone in Rebecca's designer kitchen, I poured a small amount of the wine I'd secretly transferred to a plastic bag into Oscar's testing vial. The instructions said to wait 60 seconds. 45 seconds in, the liquid turned bright blue, positive for thallium. Thallium, a heavy metal poison that mimics heart attack symptoms. Tasteless, odorless, nearly undetectable in an autopsy, unless you're specifically looking for it. It would take days to kill me, maybe weeks, plenty of time for Daniel and Rebecca to establish their alibi. I stood in that kitchen, staring at the blue liquid, and felt my world collapse. My daughter-in-law had tried to poison me, and my son, my only child, the boy I'd taught to fish and ride a bike and be a good man, had known about it. The anger came first, hot and blinding. Then the grief, cold and crushing. Then something else entirely, a strange calm, like the moment before a storm breaks over the open ocean. I knew what I had to do. I returned to the dining room, with a smile on my face. "That wine really is exceptional," I said, settling back into my chair. "But you know what? I think I'd like to save the rest for a special toast." Rebecca's smile flickered. "A toast?" "Yes. You see, I've been doing some thinking about my estate lately. Turning 70 makes a man consider his legacy." I watched her eyes light up with barely concealed greed. "I've decided to make some changes to my will." "Oh, Father, you don't have to." No, I want to. Daniel, Rebecca, You've been so good to me since Margaret passed. This beautiful dinner, this incredibly thoughtful gift." I gestured to the poisoned wine. "I want you both to know that I'm leaving everything to you. The house, the investments, the fishing boat, all of it." Daniel's face went pale. Rebecca's went triumphant. "Father, that's so generous. There's just one condition." I paused, letting the moment stretch. "I want us to drink a toast together, all three of us, from this same bottle, to seal the promise." The color drained from Rebecca's face so fast I thought she might faint. I don't drink red wine," she stammered. "It gives me migraines. Just one small sip. Surely you can manage that for family." "Dad," Daniel's voice cracked, "maybe we should... In fact, let me pour for everyone." I reached for the bottle and filled Rebecca's empty glass, then Daniel's, then topped off my own. To family. I raised my glass to my lips again, watching them both. Neither moved. "Well, aren't you going to toast with me?" "Father, I really can't." "Why not, Rebecca? Is there something wrong with the wine?" The silence that followed was deafening. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I continued, my voice hardening. "Something about what's in this bottle?" Daniel broke first. He always had been the weaker one. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to do it. She made me. She said it was the only way." "Daniel, shut up," Rebecca hissed. But my son was beyond her control now. Tears streamed down his face as the confession poured out. "I'm in trouble, Dad. Bad trouble. I made some investments, cryptocurrency stuff that Rebecca got me into, and I lost everything. $3 million. Money I borrowed from people who don't forgive debts. They were going to kill me. They sent pictures of our house. They knew where you lived, too." He was sobbing now, words tumbling over each other. Rebecca said there was a way out. Your life insurance, your estate, it would cover the debt with money to spare. She said thallium was painless, that you'd just go to sleep. I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. I swear I didn't. But I was so scared. I looked at my son, this broken man I'd raised, and I saw the boy who used to run into my arms after bad dreams, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke up with him, the young man who delivered the eulogy at his mother's funeral with such love and grace. Where had that person gone? And you, Rebecca? I turned to my daughter-in-law, who sat frozen with fury and fear warring on her face. Do you have anything to add? Her mask finally cracked. You were supposed to die, old man. You were supposed to drink the wine and have a heart attack in a few days, and no one would ever know. Do you have any idea how long I planned this? How carefully I researched which poison to use? You ruined everything. This isn't your first time, is it? Her silence was answer enough. Your first husband, I continued. The one who died of heart failure 3 years before you met Daniel. He was wealthy too, wasn't he? You can't prove anything. I don't have to. I pulled out my phone and pressed stop on the recording app that had been running since I'd arrived. The Seattle Police Department will be very interested in this conversation, and in this wine, which I've already had tested for thallium. The scream that came from Rebecca was barely human. She lunged across the table, hands reaching for my throat, but I was ready for her. 40 years of hauling fishing nets had kept me stronger than most men half my age. I caught her wrists and held her until Daniel, shocked into action, pulled her back. Dad, please don't call the police. I'll go to prison. Yes, I said quietly. You will. The police arrived within minutes. I'd called them before dinner, explained my suspicions, and they'd had officers waiting nearby. Detective Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, took my phone and the wine bottle as evidence while her team handcuffed both Daniel and Rebecca. Harold, don't do this, Daniel begged as they let him out. I'm your son. You were my son, I said, and those were the last words I spoke to him that night. 3 months later, I sat in King County Superior Court as the verdicts were read. Daniel Ford, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. 15 years in Washington State Penitentiary. Rebecca Chen Ford. Guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and, after reopening the investigation into her first husband's death, guilty of murder in the first degree. Life without parole. Rebecca showed no emotion when her sentence was announced. She stared straight ahead with those cold, calculating eyes, already planning her appeal, no doubt. Daniel wept. He wept like the child I remembered, the one who used to cry over scraped knees and lost baseball games. When the bailiff led him past my row, he stopped and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm so sorry." I nodded once, unable to speak. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Harder than Margaret's death, in some ways, because grief for the dead is natural. Grief for the living who've betrayed you is something else entirely. I sold the house in Bellevue and moved to a small cabin on Whidbey Island. The solitude helped. The sound of waves against the shore reminded me of my fishing days, of simpler times when family meant everything and trust wasn't something you had to question. Margaret's journal stayed on my nightstand. I read it every night before bed, remembering her wisdom, her intuition, her love that had apparently reached beyond the grave to save my life. 1 year after the sentencing, I drove to Monroe Correctional Complex to visit my son. The visiting room was cold and institutional, all plastic chairs and fluorescent lights. Daniel appeared behind the glass, looking older, thinner, but somehow more at peace than he had in years. "Dad, you came." "I did." We sat in silence for a long moment. "I've been doing a lot of thinking in here," Daniel finally said, "about who I became, about how I let Rebecca convince me that money was more important than family, about how scared I was." He met my eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand why you did what you did. I understand why you had to. Do you know what your mother said to me the night before you tried to poison me?" He shook his head. "She came to me in a dream and told me not to drink the wine. She saved my life, Daniel. Even after death, she found a way to protect me." Tears rolled down my son's cheeks. "Mom always knew," he whispered. "She tried to warn me about Rebecca from the beginning. I didn't listen." "No, you didn't." More silence. "I've decided something," I said. "I'm not going to carry this poison in my heart for the rest of my life. What you did was unforgivable. But you're still my son, and I choose to forgive you anyway, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let your choices destroy what's left of my life." Daniel's head dropped. His shoulders shook with sobs. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you." I stood to leave, then turned back one last time. "I'll come back. Maybe next month. We'll talk about something other than this. Maybe about the Mariners. Maybe about fishing. Maybe about nothing at all. I'd like that." I walked out of Monroe Correctional into the pale Washington sunlight and drove to Margaret's grave at Sunset Hills Cemetery. The groundskeeper had planted new flowers, and her headstone gleamed in the afternoon light. "You were right about her," I said, settling onto the stone bench beside her plot. "You were always right, and I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner." A gentle breeze stirred the maple trees overhead, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I felt Margaret's hand on my shoulder. Today, 2 years later, I'm still living in my cabin on Whidbey Island. I wake up every morning to the sound of seagulls and the smell of salt air. I fish when the weather's good, and read when it isn't. I've started volunteering at the local library, helping kids with their reading. I visit Daniel once a month. Our conversations are careful, tentative, like two people learning to walk again after a bad fall. We'll never have what we had before, but we have something. Maybe that's enough. Looking back on this true story, I realize how dangerously I trusted the wrong people. For 70 years, I believed that family meant safety, that blood ties guaranteed loyalty. I was wrong. Some people are capable of darkness that defies understanding, and they don't always announce themselves with obvious villainy. Sometimes they smile at your dinner table and plan your death over dessert. But here's what I want you to understand from these stories. The people who truly love us never really leave. Margaret found a way to reach me from beyond death, to warn me about danger I couldn't see. Whether you call it supernatural intervention or the power of intuition, something saved my life that night. Trust your dreams. Listen to your instincts. And remember that sometimes the dead protect us more than the living ever could. If you're going through your own betrayal right now, know this: healing is possible. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't about excusing what they did. It's about refusing to carry their poison in your heart. Daniel will serve his time, and Rebecca will spend the rest of her life behind bars. I've made my peace with that. God has a way of protecting us, even when we can't protect ourselves. The human spirit is remarkably resilient, and with faith, determination, and the memory of those who loved us, we can overcome any darkness. These aren't just stories, they're warnings, lessons, reminders that life can change in a single moment. This true story nearly ended with my death, but instead became a testament to survival, to the power of trusting those mysterious feelings, and to the love that transcends even death itself. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share your own experiences with family betrayal or warnings from beyond. Your story might save someone else's life. And if you want to hear more true stories about survival, justice, and the unbreakable bonds of love, please subscribe to Maple Vengeance. Every week, I share stories that remind us all how precious life really is. Until next time, stay safe, trust your instincts, and never forget that you're never alone, even in your darkest moments.